The day of my wedding had felt like the closing scene of a romantic film, everything perfectly aligned, every smile rehearsed by destiny itself. I remember standing before the mirror that morning, my veil draped over soft curls, eyes glistening not just with a touch of makeup but with a shimmer of dreams I had carried since girlhood. I was going to marry David. My David. The man who had whispered to me under starlit skies that I was his everything. His forever. The church bells rang as though the heavens themselves were applauding us. Guests filled the pews, their faces beaming with joy, their hands clutching bouquets of roses tied with satin ribbons. I walked down the aisle on my father's arm, my heart pounding with excitement. Every step felt like it carried the weight of 1,000 promises. My eyes met David's at the altar, and his smile, warm, confident, perfect, made my knees tremble. He looked like the man I had prayed for, tall, sharp-featured, dressed in a suit that framed him like a king. His gaze never wavered, as though I was the only soul alive in that church. When he took my hand, his grip was steady, almost too steady, but I mistook it for strength rather than restraint. The vows were said. The rings exchanged. The kiss, soft, tender, the kind that sends whispers of eternity rushing through your veins. Applause filled the air, but all I heard was the thundering certainty in my chest. This is it. This is the man who will love me endlessly. That night we checked into the honeymoon suite, a room drenched in candlelight and anticipation. Rose petals littered the bedspread. Champagne sat chilled in a silver bucket, and I, flushed with excitement, slipped into the silk nightgown I had chosen weeks before. My heart fluttered like a bird trapped in a cage, eager for release. But when I reached for him, when I leaned in with all the tenderness of a bride ready to give herself completely, David pulled away. First I thought he was teasing. I laughed nervously, touching his arm, whispering, "Come on, it's our wedding night." But his expression was unreadable, cold, almost calculating. He sat on the edge of the bed, back turned, and muttered, "My body, my choice." The words didn't register at first. They sounded alien in the softness of that room, so out of place against the backdrop of rose petals and candlelight. I waited for the punchline, for the smile to break across his face. But there was no smile, no laughter. Only silence and the steady rise and fall of his shoulders. I felt my own smile falter. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling. He turned then, his eyes cool, detached. "I don't owe you my body just because we got married," he said simply, as if stating the obvious. "It's my right to decide." The room went cold. My heart, which had been so full only hours before, crumbled like paper in fire. I didn't know what to say. Weren't we supposed to be one now? Weren't vows more than words? I searched his face for softness, for love, but found only an unyielding wall. I felt small in that moment, so painfully small, as though I had mistaken myself for someone worthy of his affection when, in truth, I was just a spectator in a life he had scripted for his own convenience. That night, I lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling as the shadows from the flickering candles danced like cruel specters. My chest ached with questions. Had I misunderstood him all along? Had I been blind to something darker hiding behind that charming smile? In the morning, he acted as though nothing had happened. He dressed sharply, kissed my forehead as if nothing had broken between us, and said, "Breakfast." His voice was cheerful, practiced, the kind of tone you'd use with a stranger at a cafe. I laughed along weakly, afraid to ruin the fragile illusion. Maybe it was nerves, I told myself. Maybe he just needed time. Love required patience, didn't it? After all, marriage was a journey, not a single night. And so, I swallowed my hurt and smiled. But the smile felt like glass in my mouth. The honeymoon passed in a blur of scenic beaches and forced laughter. We took photographs where he held me close for the camera but pulled away the moment the lens disappeared. At dinners, he ordered wine for us both, his charm dazzling waiters and strangers alike. To everyone watching, we were the perfect newlyweds. But in the quiet of our hotel room, the truth gnawed at me. He never touched me. Not once. Each night when I reached for him, he turned away with the same phrase. My body, my choice. First I tried to reason. David, I love you. Don't you love me too? Of course I love you, he'd reply, eyes on his phone, his tone flat. But that doesn't mean I have to give you what you want. His words pierced deeper than any blade. Love without closeness. What kind of love was that? When we returned home, friends and family swarmed us with questions. How was the honeymoon? Was it magical? I smiled, nodded, told them it was perfect. I lied because the alternative was unthinkable. To admit the truth would mean facing it myself. Weeks turned into months, and the distance between us grew like a canyon. He was attentive in public, distant in private. We dined with friends, hosted gatherings, posed for social media with captions about newlywed bliss. But behind closed doors, we were strangers sharing an address. Sometimes in the dead of night, I'd press my hand against his back as he slept, as if trying to remember what warmth felt like. I'd whisper prayers into the darkness, begging for the man I thought I had married to resurface. But he never did. And though I didn't know it then, that was only the beginning. The fairy tale was over. What lay ahead would not be love, but a lesson. A lesson that would cost him everything. And me. It would cost me my innocence, my blind trust, and the girl who once believed happily ever afters were promised, rather than earned. The first year of marriage is supposed to be a honeymoon phase, or so people say. In reality, mine felt like an endless loop of unanswered questions. When I woke up each morning, I played my role flawlessly. I brewed the coffee, buttered the toast, and greeted David with a cheerful smile. He returned the smile, kissed my forehead, and slipped on his jacket before heading to work. From the outside, we were a perfectly functioning couple. From the inside, however, we were unraveling thread by thread. At night, when the world grew quiet, the truth came roaring back. I'd lie beside him in bed, heart aching with longing, and whisper, David, can we talk about this? He would sigh, roll to his side, and reply, There's nothing to talk about. Stop being so dramatic. His dismissiveness cut deeper than the rejection itself. It wasn't just the absence of intimacy, it was the denial of my pain, as though my needs were ridiculous, invalid. But I didn't give up, not then. Love, real love, I thought, was about patience and compromise. I convinced myself that if I tried harder, if I were gentler, kinder, more understanding, he would come around. So I bought lingerie I'd never dared wear before, hoping to surprise him. When he came home from work, I lit candles, played soft music, and waited. He walked in, saw me standing there, and frowned. What is this supposed to be? It's for you, I said, trying to sound playful, though my voice wavered. For us. His eyes hardened. I told you already. Stop trying to force me into something I don't want. The rejection landed like a slap. He walked past me, loosened his tie, and retreated to his office without a backward glance. I stood there in lace and tears, realizing I had become a ghost in my own home, seen but not truly seen. It was my friend Clara who first suggested therapy. Sometimes people need help unlocking what's buried, she said gently over coffee one afternoon. Maybe he has his reasons. Maybe something happened in his past. I clung to that idea like a lifeline. If there was trauma, if there was fear, then maybe love could heal it. When I brought it up to David, he laughed. Not a warm laugh, but a cold, sharp one that made my stomach twist. You want us to go to therapy because I don't want to sleep with you, he said. Do you even hear yourself? That's pathetic. I flushed with shame. Pathetic. The word clung to me like a second skin. But the loneliness didn't fade. It grew heavier with each passing week, pressing down on my chest until even the sound of his footsteps in the hallway filled me with dread. Sometimes when he worked late, and he worked late often, I wandered the empty house, running my fingers along the walls we'd painted together. The laughter we once shared during those early days of decorating now echoed like a cruel memory. I scrolled through old photographs of us. Our engagement trip to Italy, the picnic by the river, the countless selfies where his smile had seemed so genuine. Was it all a lie? Or had something changed after the vows were said? The questions gnawed at me. One evening I decided to take control. I booked a weekend trip to the mountains. Just the two of us, I said brightly, sliding the reservation confirmation across the table. David barely glanced at it. I'm busy. It's months from now, I pressed, my tone more pleading than I wanted. You'll be free. He sighed heavily, as though my request was a burden. Finally he nodded. Fine. Whatever makes you happy. But it didn't make me happy. His reluctant agreement felt like pity, not partnership. The trip itself was a disaster. I had imagined cozy cabins, long hikes, maybe a glass of wine by the fire. Instead, he spent most of the time glued to his laptop, claiming he had urgent work. When I suggested we go for a walk, he muttered, "You go. I'm not interested." I wandered the forest trails alone, tears slipping silently down my cheeks, feeling more married to the silence of the trees than to the man I had promised forever. That night, when I returned to the cabin, I found him asleep on the couch with his phone clutched tightly in his hand. Curiosity, or perhaps desperation, drove me to peek at the screen. It was locked, of course, but the glimpse of a name flashing on the notification made my blood run cold. It wasn't work. It wasn't urgent business. It was someone named Aaron. The pieces didn't fit yet, but the suspicion planted itself like a seed in the darkest corner of my mind. When we got back home, I tried again to talk to him. "David, are you happy with me?" He glanced up from his laptop, clearly annoyed. "Why wouldn't I be? You don't touch me, you don't talk to me. I feel like I'm losing you." He slammed the laptop shut. "God, you're so needy. Not everything is about sex. Grow up." Tears blurred my vision, but I held them back. I had learned by then that showing weakness only gave him more power. That night, while he slept soundly beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my chest heavy with unspoken truths. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to demand answers. But all I could do was lie there, silently breaking. Months passed in this half-life. My body ached for touch, not just the physical but the emotional intimacy that comes with it. My soul ached for a partner, not a roommate. Friends commented on how radiant I looked when David and I appeared together at dinners. "You two are so perfect," they'd say. I smiled politely, swallowing the bitterness that rose in my throat. If only they knew. Behind the masks, our marriage was rotting. But I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. I still believed in the man I thought I had married, the man who had once looked at me like I was his entire world. I didn't realize then that the world he lived in had never included me at all. And soon the truth would come crashing down, shattering every illusion I had clung to. Started with the phone. For months, I had told myself that David's distance was just stress, or maybe something unspoken in his past. But the night I saw that notification from Aaron, the seed of suspicion refused to stop growing. I tried to bury it. I reminded myself that good wives trust their husbands, that snooping only destroys marriages. But the silence between us was already corrosive, and my instincts screamed louder with each passing day. So one evening when David was in the shower, I picked up his phone. My hands trembled as though I were holding a grenade, the weight of guilt heavy on my conscience. I didn't know his passcode, but desperation makes people observant. I remembered the numbers he used once when unlocking his iPad for a presentation. My fingers typed them slowly. 0-7-2-1. The phone unlocked. My heart pounded in my chest so loudly I feared he might hear it over the running water. I opened his messages. And there she was, Erin. Dozens of unread texts glowing like poisonous stars in the night sky. Erin, when will she stop bothering you? Erin, you don't owe her anything. You're with me, and that's what matters. Erin, last night was amazing. I don't know how much longer I can stand sneaking around. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. I scrolled further, hoping, praying that I had misunderstood. But there was no misunderstanding. There were pictures too. Smiling selfies of them in restaurants I had begged David to take me to. A shot of him kissing her cheek at the very mountain resort where he'd left me alone in the woods. And then, the cruelest cut of all. A message from him. David, she's clueless. She thinks I'm just stressed. Don't worry, this is temporary. You're the one I actually want. The world tilted. My knees buckled, and I sat on the edge of the bed, clutching the phone like a dagger that had pierced my own chest. Everything made sense now. The rejection, the contempt, the excuses. It wasn't about trauma or nerves. It was about betrayal. He hadn't withheld intimacy from everyone. Only from me. The shower stopped. Panic surged through me, and I quickly set the phone back where I found it. I slipped under the covers, heart racing, eyes squeezed shut. He walked into the room minutes later, humming as he dried his hair. He didn't notice the tremor in my breathing or the stiffness in my posture. And why would he? In his mind, I was still the clueless wife. The next morning I looked at him differently. The charming smile that once made me weak now felt like a mask, plastic and false. Every word he spoke sounded rehearsed, every touch staged for an audience. Felt sick. But beneath the sickness, something else stirred, something I hadn't felt in months. Anger. I had bent myself into pieces trying to love him, trying to fix what was never broken but deliberately destroyed. And for what? For him to laugh about me behind my back, call me clueless, treat me as an inconvenience. Well, I would not be pitied. I would not be mocked. The first step was silence. I stopped asking him for affection. I stopped begging for scraps of love. I let him think I was still blind, that I was still the same fragile woman clinging to the hope of his touch. But inside I was rebuilding. I started going out more. Brunches with Clara, evening walks with friends, little adventures I had once postponed because David was too busy. First, it felt strange, like I was sneaking out of a prison cell. But slowly, it became liberation. Clara noticed the change. "You're glowing again," she said one afternoon as we sipped wine at a rooftop cafe. I smiled, though it wasn't joy that lit me from within. It was resolve. In the quiet hours of the night, when David snored peacefully beside me, I planned. I thought about every time he dismissed me, every cruel word, every false smile. And I thought about Erin, this shadow who had stolen what I had been promised. But the more I reflected, the more I realized it wasn't just about her. It was about him. About how easily he had deceived, manipulated, and discarded me while pretending to be the perfect husband. He had underestimated me. That would be his undoing. The real awakening, however, didn't come from anger alone. Came from rediscovery. I picked up hobbies I had abandoned. Painting, running, even journaling. I poured my pain into canvas and paper, creating messy, beautiful testaments to the chaos inside me. Each stroke of paint, each mile jogged, each page written reminded me that I was more than his neglected wife. I was a woman with dreams, desires, and strength that he could never take away. And as I rebuilt myself, I saw him more clearly than ever before. David was not a king. He was a coward. A man too weak to honor his vows, too selfish to let go of me, too arrogant to imagine I might outsmart him. That realization changed everything. One evening over dinner I tested the waters. "So," I said casually, twirling pasta around my fork, "I've been thinking of taking a few courses. Maybe go back to school, expand my career." David barely looked up. "Why? You don't need that." I'm doing well enough for us. His arrogance was almost laughable now. Before, his dismissals had wounded me. Now they only fueled me. I smiled sweetly. Maybe you're right. Still, it couldn't hurt to learn more. Knowledge is power after all. He nodded absently, too busy scrolling his phone to notice the sharpness in my tone. But I noticed, and I was learning how to be patient, how to watch without being seen, how to gather strength quietly, like a storm waiting just beyond the horizon. The breaking point came a few weeks later, when David announced he'd be gone for a work conference over the weekend. I kissed him goodbye at the door, smiled as he drove off, and then followed him. My hands shook as I trailed his car through the winding streets, but my determination anchored me. I kept my distance, heart pounding, until he pulled into a hotel parking lot. Minutes later, Erin stepped out of a taxi, her laughter floating through the night air as she ran into his arms. He kissed her. Not a shy peck, but a deep, passionate kiss. The kind I had begged for, the kind he had denied me. I didn't cry this time. Instead, I felt an icy calm settle over me. Watching them together was like peeling the last layer of illusion from my eyes. There he was, my husband, tangled in the arms of another woman. His betrayal laid bare under the streetlights. And in that moment I knew. This wasn't the end of me. It was the beginning. The beginning of my awakening. And the beginning of his downfall. The night I followed David and saw him with Erin, something inside me crystallized. The raw pain that had once paralyzed me now sharpened into purpose. I didn't scream, didn't confront, didn't let him know I had seen the truth. Instead, I turned the car around, drove home, and sat in the dark of our living room, hands clenched tight around a glass of wine. He thought I was clueless. He thought I was weak. And that was exactly what I needed him to keep thinking. Revenge is not born in fire. It is born in patience. The first step was information. I began small, sifting through the papers in his office when he left for work. Contracts, receipts, tax returns, everything I could get my hands on. David had always been careless about leaving things out, assuming I was too naive to understand. He wasn't entirely wrong. I didn't understand everything I found. But I didn't need to. I took pictures, scanned documents, stored them quietly in a hidden folder on my laptop. Then came his finances. I remembered overhearing once that he kept a separate account for business. A little digging, carefully, discreetly, confirmed it. Multiple accounts, in fact. Money flowing in directions I didn't recognize. Some of it linked to Erin. The betrayal stung anew, but I swallowed it down. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became. David wasn't just unfaithful. He was reckless. He had tied parts of his financial life to his mistress. That was leverage. The second step was control. I didn't leave my job, though he had often suggested I should. Instead, I quietly applied for a promotion. When I got it, I smiled across the dinner table and said casually, "Isn't it wonderful? Extra income for us both." He nodded absently, scrolling through his phone. He didn't even notice the shift happening. How my independence grew while his grip on me weakened. At the same time, I started building my own safety net. A separate account in my name only. Automatic transfers every payday. It wasn't much at first, but it was mine. Untouchable, secure. The third step was pretense. I played the role of the dutiful wife flawlessly. I laughed at his jokes. I kissed his cheek when he came home late, smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't mine. I asked no questions, offered no accusations. I even pretended to believe his story about the conference. Inside, I memorized every lie. The more comfortable he felt, the sloppier he became. He left his phone on the counter unlocked once, and I seized the opportunity to scroll through messages, forwarding key ones to a secret email account I had created. Proof. Hard proof. And when he left town again to visit a client, I followed him a second time. This time I took photos. Clear, undeniable photos of him and Aaron together. But my plan wasn't just about exposing him. That would have been too easy, too simple. No, I wanted him to feel what I had felt. The shame, the helplessness, the humiliation. So I began weaving a web. At work events, I praised him lavishly in front of colleagues, planting seeds of his devotion to me. I crafted the image of us as the perfect couple, the kind everyone envied. The higher his pedestal, the harder his fall would be. I even started inviting friends over more often, hosting small dinners. David, ever the charmer, played his part well. Everyone saw the perfect husband, the perfect marriage. And I smiled, knowing that one day soon they would see the truth. But revenge isn't only about destruction. It's also about rebuilding yourself. I signed up for classes in business management, pouring my evenings into learning skills I had once left to him. I networked quietly, forming connections he didn't know I had. Each step I took was a reminder that my life wasn't tethered to his lies. For the first time in months I felt alive. Not because of him but despite him. The final piece of my plan came to me late one night, as I stared at the photographs of him and Aaron on my laptop. David had built his life on appearances. Successful job, beautiful wife, charming smile. But appearances are fragile. All it takes is a crack for the illusion to shatter. And I had more than a crack. Had a hammer. I began drafting a file. A neat, organized collection of screenshots, photos, financial records, and messages. I labeled everything carefully. Infidelity. Misuse of funds. False conferences. The file had one purpose. To destroy him completely. Not just personally but professionally. But I wasn't reckless. Timing was everything. I couldn't just throw the evidence into the world. No, first I had to make sure that when the storm came, I would be standing tall while he drowned. So I waited. Smiled. I played the role of the clueless wife a little longer. All the while I whispered silently to myself, "Your time is coming, David." The breaking point came when he sat across from me one evening, twirling his fork lazily through his dinner, and said, "You know, I think Erin understands me better than anyone else. Sometimes I feel like she's the only one who really gets me." He didn't even flinch when he said it. Didn't notice how my hand froze midair, how my chest tightened. I forced a smile, nodding as though it were the most casual statement in the world. Inside, though, the decision solidified. It was time. Time for the plan to shift from preparation to execution. He had mistaken my silence for weakness. He had mistaken my patience for passivity. But soon he would learn the truth. I wasn't the clueless wife. I was the storm he never saw coming. The night I decided to strike, the air felt different. Heavy, electric, like the world itself knew a storm was coming. David still believed in the illusion he'd built, that I was the docile wife, blind and desperate for scraps of his affection. He kissed my cheek that morning, mumbled something about a late meeting, and left. He didn't see the glint in my eyes. He didn't hear the silent goodbye in my heart, because when he walked out that door, he walked into the last day of his empire. I began with precision. The file I had been curating for months was complete. Texts, photos, receipts, financial records, even the screenshots of his declarations of love to Erin. It wasn't just proof of infidelity, it was proof of misuse of company funds. Dinners with her billed as client meetings. Hotel stays disguised as business expenses. At lunchtime, I sent the file to his company's HR department, CCing the board of directors. The subject line was simple, professional, devastating. Employee misconduct. David last name. Within minutes, the emails started pinging back. "Thank you for bringing this to our attention. We'll investigate immediately." The dominoes had started to fall. Next came the social strike. I scheduled a carefully crafted post on social media. Nothing emotional, nothing messy. Just a collage of photos. David and Erin at their conference, time-stamped receipts, and a caption that read, "To friends and family who believed in our marriage. I regret to inform you that David chose otherwise. After months of deception and betrayal, I can no longer stay silent. To those who wondered why I always looked so tired, it's because I was carrying a secret I didn't deserve. Today I let that burden go." Hit post. By evening it had spread like wildfire. Friends texted me non-stop, some offering comfort, others sending screenshots of their shock. Colleagues of his whispered, the perfect image of the devoted husband, now shattered in front of them all. And David? He was still blissfully unaware, sitting in some restaurant across town with Erin, laughing at a joke I would never hear. He came home late that night, humming under his breath, smelling faintly of wine and perfume. He tossed his jacket over the chair and grinned. "You're still up." I looked up from the couch, calm, composed. "How was your meeting?" "Long," he said, loosening his tie. "But productive." I smiled faintly. "I'm glad. Oh, by the way, your company emailed me. Something about serious concerns regarding misconduct. You might want to check your inbox." His face faltered for the first time in months. He pulled out his phone, scrolled quickly, and I watched the color drain from his cheeks. What did you do?" His voice cracked. I tilted my head. "Nothing really. Just shared the truth." He swore under his breath, fingers flying across the screen. But the truth spreads faster than lies. He was already too late. Moments later his phone buzzed. Then again. And again. He glanced at me, eyes wide with panic. "They suspended me. Pending investigation." I shrugged, feigning sympathy. "I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. Maybe you should explain those hotel receipts with Erin's name on them." The look on his face was priceless. But the night wasn't over. As he spiraled, I stood, walked to the bedroom, and wheeled out a suitcase I had packed earlier. "What's that?" he demanded, his voice sharp, desperate. "My freedom," I said simply. He lunged forward. "You can't just leave. We can fix this." I laughed softly, a sound without bitterness this time, only finality. "Fix this? You never wanted to fix us, David. You wanted me quiet and blind. But I see you now. And so does everyone else." I handed him an envelope. Inside were the divorce papers, already signed on my end. His hands shook as he tore it open. You planned this." I met his eyes, steady and unflinching. "For months. While you thought I was clueless, I was building my escape. While you mocked me, I was gathering proof. And while you betrayed me, I was becoming stronger." For the first time the mask slipped entirely. The charming, confident David was gone. In his place stood a man small, desperate, exposed. I picked up my suitcase, walked to the door, and turned back one last time. "You said it was your body, your choice. Well, this is my life. My choice. And I choose to live it without you." Then I closed the door behind me. The weeks that followed were a blur, but not of sorrow. David's world collapsed quickly. His company fired him after confirming his misuse of funds. Erin, unwilling to shoulder the fallout, vanished from his life. Friends who had once admired him distanced themselves, whispers of his betrayal chasing him everywhere. Meanwhile I flourished. I moved into a new apartment, bright, airy, filled with plants and sunlight. I framed one of my paintings and hung it on the wall, a symbol of the woman I had reclaimed. I poured energy into my new role at work, finding joy in achievements that were mine alone. Clara and I traveled to Italy, retracing the trip I had once taken with David. But this time there were no illusions. Just laughter, wine, and the sweet taste of freedom. And slowly, piece by piece, I stitched myself back together. One evening, months later, I sat on my balcony, sipping tea as the city lights glittered below. The air was warm, carrying the scent of blooming jasmine. I thought about David then, not with longing, not even with anger, but with clarity. He had taken so much from me. My trust, my innocence, my fairy tale dreams. But in the end, he had given me something far greater. The chance to rise from the ashes stronger than I ever imagined. Revenge had been sweet, yes. Watching him fall was a justice I would never forget. But the true victory was this moment, the quiet, steady heartbeat of a life that was fully, wholly mine. I smiled, lifting my cup to the stars. To new beginnings, I whispered. And for the first time in a long time I felt truly free.